Let us move on to Bliss in Being consults. Question of the day from Lucy in California. My husband and I have been married for about 5 years now. We're happy in general, but there is one issue that is straining our relationship. We have really different sexual needs in terms of frequency. He wants sex 3 to 4 times a week, and I want sex at most 1 time per week. He never pressures me, but I feel like I'm depriving him of a basic need. I end up having sex even when I don't want to because of guilt. How do couples balance different levels of sexual desire? Well, what a complicated and wonderful question. Thank you for asking this. This is one of those questions where it's really hard to give specific advice and guidance because I don't have you and your partner sitting in front of me. But here's a couple things that I'll highlight, Lucy. One, I love to read in this that your partner isn't pressuring you outwardly to have sex. That's not healthy. That's not okay. And I'm really happy to hear that that's not happening. I also hear that your own guilt, and he might be doing some things that incite this guilt, I'm not sure, but your own guilt causes you to sometimes engage in intimacy that you would prefer not to, or that you feel like is an obligation. So that's one thing I noticed. And then I also noticed this idea of you had said, I'm depriving him of a basic need. And so this basic need of sexual intimacy, yes, it is a core and fundamental need for many humans to be sexually intimate and connected. I want to also just note that having intercourse with another person is not the only way to have that basic need met. So that's something I also just want you to consider. And I don't know what that would look like for your relationship. There are so many different ways that couples can have their sexual needs met. And it doesn't always have to be with each other, having sex. It can be intimacy in different ways. There are couples who engage in polyamory. There are couples who engage in individual ways of self-pleasure. So there's a lot of different options. I think one of the most important things is to begin a dialogue about some of those options with a therapist, ideally, because you've really clearly identified the problem. And you've also indicated that you feel stuck. Like, here's this problem. He wants sex 3 times a week. I only want sex once. I have to give in or he has to be deprived. So whenever you find yourself going into this dichotomy, either this or this, it usually means that you need some help from someone who can help you generate more options. There's rarely only 2 options in this world, Lucy. And sometimes it takes someone from the outside, or it could be a friend, or it could be someone from your spiritual group. It could be just anyone you trust to help you really think through how can each of us get our needs met in ways that make us feel comfortable and make us feel safe and grounded. One thing I think is important to also consider is there was a nice, there was a nice, very simple model that I put into the Instagram post that consider there's, when you think of female sexual health, you can think of biological factors, psychological factors, and also interpersonal factors. And there's models that include more elements, and I think more elements are sometimes warranted. But just for the sake of this brief video, I think looking at biological, psychological, and social interpersonal, so like between you and your partner or you and your community, is a nice place to start. So let's kind of go through these and see what are the different elements of each category. So again, female sexual health, when we think of biological factors, and if an individual is feeling dissatisfied with their sexual life or their sexual intimacy or connection, we can think of how does sexual health change chronologically over time? So the sexual health of a 18-year-old is so different than that of a 30-year-old, than that of a 65-year-old, than that of a 80-year-old. So age plays a significant factor in sexual drive and satisfaction and sexual practices. Also, menopausal status, which is connected to age, and hormones, which may or may not be connected to age, but can be connected to health conditions. It can be connected sometimes to the food that we eat. And so, if your sexual relationship is not where you want it to be, or you want to examine it further, considering the biological factors with a trusted health professional. So it could be a gynecologist, but this could also be your primary care doctor. It could also be a family medicine doctor. So these are individuals who can really kind of begin to tease out what has changed about your sexual health over time in terms of your biological makeup, your hormones, your course of menopause, your physical health, and how could a physician help to shift some of those so your sexual identity is more congruent with how you want it to be. Psychological factors is another important category to consider. So, a lot of people that I work with, their sexual health really changes after they've been diagnosed with depression or anxiety. Sometimes people's sexual health changes after they begin a course of medicine. And, these are because I think sometimes with sexual health, if it's not where we want it to be, all of a sudden it's just, I'm damaged, I'm ashamed, there's something wrong with me, I need to be fixed. And that's, it comes a lot from our society, I think, expecting that, sexual connection and intimacy is always easy and carefree and it's never any work. But in actuality, there are times when we need a little bit of help in figuring out what's going on. Why am I stuck right now? And so psychological factors play a role in that. If we're going through, a time when we're feeling a little bit depressed or we're feeling anxious, those emotions are not necessarily congruent with deep, sort of being connected to another person, letting go, being carefree. And sometimes the feelings of depression, the weight, the sadness, the hopelessness, similarly, feelings of anxiety, racing thoughts, worry, your heart racing. It's difficult to shut that off so you can be fully present with another person. Also, life satisfaction and self-esteem. So when we're in a really great place in life, it's easier to see ourselves as deeply connected to another person. But if we're feeling like we're stuck and we should be doing something else with our job and we don't know if we're good enough and we're just questioning the core parts of who we are, it can be much more challenging to have that intimacy. So that's another category to really consider. Again, it can be helpful to consider with a therapist. You can even just talk to your partner about it. And then, the third one is interpersonal factors. So of course, the relationship that we have with our significant other is going to change the way we interact sexually. That only makes sense. But sometimes it's not as obvious. So sometimes we can think like when our sexual life is not where we want it to be, instead of taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, what's going on with my body? What's going on with my mind? What's going on with my relationship? And really just thinking more like a scientist, examining, questioning, probing, not just for us, but also for our significant other, we can tend to just generalize. I'm bad, I'm not good enough, I'm ashamed, and then there's shutdown. And so, I like this model because it's encouraging us to just take a step back. And so, I would say, Lucy, that one of the ways that couples balance different levels of sexual desire is to, one, talk about the different levels in a way that isn't so personal. It's not a lack of desire for you. It's not something wrong with me. but it could be some elements in our life that's making this more difficult. So it's one, actually having the conversation. Two, I think it's recruiting people in your community, like a therapist, a doctor, again, someone in a spiritual community, a family member, a close family friend, to sit down and think about the different options. That's what I would suggest. I hope that was helpful, Lucy. Just such an important question, and I appreciate you having the courage to put it out there.